Good day, everyone, and welcome. Here's something to think about. In our society, one that really strives for justice, how do we square the deep trauma of sexual violence with the skepticism that sometimes faces survivors? Especially, when a victim comes forward years later, the accused denies everything, and it's all within a family. How does the highest court weigh that? This is the story of AAA and her uncle, Leo Ibañez y Morales. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, really sparked a national conversation. Today, we're doing a deep dive into this pretty significant Supreme Court case. It involves multiple counts of qualified rape. We'll unpack the facts, the journey through the courts, the big questions the Supreme Court tackled, and their final decision.
Exactly. And this case, just for reference, is People of the Philippines versus Leo Ibañez y Morales. That's GR No 23984, and the decision came down on July 28, 2020. So the core accusations against Leo Ibañez, they relate to events back in Negros Occidental between March and May of 2003. He was accused of 4 separate instances of qualified rape against his niece by affinity, AAA. She was 17 at the time.
Right, 17. And can you walk us through the specifics of what AAA reported? It sounds incredibly disturbing.
It really is. According to the court records, the first incident was sometime in March 2003. Ibañez allegedly came to AAA's house, asked about her parents. When he found out she was alone, the report says he grabbed her, pointed a knife at her, kissed her, groped her, and then forced her into a bedroom and assaulted her.
With a knife involved.
Yes, and apparently threatened to kill her if she told anyone.
Horrifying. And this wasn't just once.
No, sadly not. Similar things allegedly happened again on April 12th and April 25th, 2003, built around 5 p.m., according to the testimony. Again, the pattern was him allegedly entering the house when she was alone, using force, the knife, intimidation, and then the assault.
Okay, and there was a fourth instance.
Yes, on May 11th, 2003, around 7 p.m. This time, she apparently had a friend over initially. Ibañez came in while the friend was there. After the friend left, around 9 p.m., AAA pleaded with him to leave, but he allegedly didn't. The report says she tried to get away, slipped and fell, and he assaulted her again then.
Just awful. Was there any medical examination done after these alleged assaults?
There was. 3 days after that last alleged incident in May, AAA had a medical exam. Dr. Raymond Antonio Maguad testified about the findings, which included old hymenal lacerations at the 3 and 9 o'clock position.
Old lacerations? What did the doctor say that meant?
Well, the doctor stated that these findings were consistent with penetration by a blunt object, like a penis, so it corroborated that penetration could have occurred.
Okay. And Mr. Ibañez, what was his side of the story? His defense against these, incredibly serious charges?
He denied everything, absolutely denied it all. His defense was basically an alibi and a claim of frame-up. He said that during the time these incidents supposedly happened, March to May 2003, he was working consistently.
What?
As a carpenter and welder. He said he was working at a resort about 10 kilometers away from AAA's house, so he couldn't have been there. And he also claimed the whole thing was fabricated because of a land dispute he had with AAA's father. He even said he hadn't set foot in AAA's house since 2001.
A complete denial and an alibi. So you have these two starkly different accounts. How did the first court, the regional trial court, handle this?
The RTC in Negros Occidental heard the case, looked at the evidence, and on August 27, 2015, they issued their joint decision. They found Leo Ibañez guilty, beyond reasonable doubt, on all 4 counts of qualified rape.
All 4 counts. What was their reasoning?
They were very clear. The RTC stated that his denial and his alibi, they just couldn't overcome AAA's testimony, which they described as direct, positive, and categorical. Plus, they felt the medical findings, those lacerations, helped support her account.
In the sentence.
Reclusion, perpetual, basically life imprisonment without parole for each of the 4 counts. He was also ordered to pay damages for each count. P75,000 civil indemnity, P75,000 moral damages, and P30,000 exemplary damages.
A very decisive ruling from the RTC, but of course defendants can appeal. Did he take it to the Court of Appeals?
He did, yes. That's the next step in the process. So Ibañez appealed to the Court of Appeals, or CA. The CA came out with its decision on December 21st, 2016, and they actually affirmed the RTC's guilty verdict.
So they agreed with the conviction. Did they have anything to add or change?
They agreed on the conviction, yes. They addressed the defense's point about minor inconsistencies in AAA's testimony. The CA said, look, minor inconsistencies, especially when recalling traumatic events, don't necessarily destroy credibility. They also made a point to say that, the absence of visible physical injuries doesn't mean rape didn't happen. The core issue is lack of consent.
That's a crucial point. Lack of consent, not necessarily physical battle scars.
Exactly. However, the CA did modify the damages. They increased them quite significantly. For each count, it became P100,000 for civil indemnity, P100,000 for moral damages, and P100,000 for exemplary damages, plus interest.
Wow. Okay, so two courts now siding with the prosecution, affirming the conviction. But Ibañez still had one more avenue, right? The Supreme Court.
That's right, the highest court in the land. He elevated the case.
So what was the specific legal question they had to grapple with? Was it just a review of the facts again?
Essentially, yeah. The sole issue before the Supreme Court, in this case GR No. 231984, was pretty straightforward. Did the Court of Appeals make a mistake? Did they err in upholding the conviction? It was really Ibañez's last chance to argue that the lower courts got it wrong.
And the outcome, what did the Supreme Court decide?
On July 28, 2020, the Supreme Court handed down its decision. They affirmed the Court of Appeals, so the conviction stood. Leo Ibañez y Morales was found guilty on all 4 counts of qualified rape.
They upheld the conviction. Did they elaborate on why? Did they just rubber stamp the CA decision?
Oh no, they definitely elaborated.
Yeah.
They started by reiterating a really important principle in Philippine law. Factual findings of the trial courts, especially when the CA agrees with them, carry immense weight. The Supreme Court generally won't disturb those findings unless there's a really clear showing that the lower courts, missed something crucial or completely misapplied the facts or the law.
And they didn't see that here.
No. They found no reason to deviate. They looked at the consistency, the categorical nature of AAA's testimony. They reiterated that in rape cases, the victim's testimony, if credible, can be enough on its own for a conviction.
Even without other evidence?
It can be, yes. But here, they also pointed to the medical findings, the hymenal lacerations, as corroborating evidence. It supported her story. They also addressed the defense arguments again. Denial, frame up the court called these inherently weak defenses, especially against positive testimony.
What about the alleged inconsistencies the defense raised?
The Supreme Court agreed with the CA they were minor, didn't touch the core issue of whether the assaults happened, and crucially, the court hammered home the point about resistance.
Ah, yes. The idea that a victim must fight back.
Exactly. The court strongly rejected that. They emphasized, resistance is not an element of rape. The element is lack of consent. Not fighting back doesn't mean you consented. It could mean you were paralyzed by fear, intimidated, especially, they noted, given the relationship here, uncle and niece. That's moral ascendancy.
And the weapon, the threats.
Right. All those factors negate the idea that lack of resistance equals consent. So they upheld the reclusion perpetua sentences based on the law, RA 9346, and also affirmed the increased damages set by the CA, calling them consistent with current standards. And interest applies until paid.
And this decision was penned by Justice Lazaro Javier, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Reflecting on all this, the whole journey of this case, what does the Supreme Court's focus on the survivor's testimony and pushing back against those sort of victim-blaming arguments about resistance? What does that tell us, you think, about where the Philippine legal system is heading regarding consent and justice for sexual violence?
That's a really important question. I think this ruling is, it's quite significant. It signals a strengthening resolve within the legal system to truly center the survivor's experience in these cases. By emphasizing the credibility of AAA's testimony, the court acknowledges the reality that these crimes often happen in private, without other witnesses.
Right.
And by explicitly rejecting the lack of resistance argument, they're sending a very clear message. The focus should be on the actions of the accused and the absence of consent, not on scrutinizing the victim's reaction to trauma. It reflects, I believe, a more evolved understanding that consent must be active, freely given, and that power dynamics, threats, fear, they completely invalidate any notion of consent.
It feels like a move away from putting the victim on trial, in a sense.
Precisely. It reinforces that survivors shouldn't face a second ordeal in court where their every action is questioned. The responsibility lies with the perpetrator.
We'd really like to know what you, our listeners, think about this case and the Supreme Court's decision. Does it resonate with you? Let us know in the comments. And if this deep dive into the Ibañez case has been insightful for you, please do hit that favorite button. It helps others find this discussion.
And just to recap, this case really highlights some key legal doctrines that are worth remembering. First, the credibility of the victim. A credible testimony can be enough for a rape conviction. It's powerful.
Okay.
Second, resistance is not an element of rape. The absolute key is lack of consent. Absence of resistance doesn't mean consent, especially with force, threats, or, like here, moral ascendancy due to the relationship.
Right, that uncle-niece dynamic.
Exactly. Third, denial is a weak defense. Courts generally see denial and alibi as weak, especially if they're not backed up and are countered by positive testimony. Fourth, moral ascendancy in qualified rape. The relationship itself can be an aggravating factor, making consent impossible. Fifth, corroborative medical evidence. While not always essential, things like the medical findings here can definitely strengthen the victim's account. And finally, damages. Survivors are entitled to significant damages, civil, moral, and exemplary, to acknowledge the immense harm caused.
Those are really crucial takeaways. This deep dive into People of the Philippines versus Leo Ibañez y Morales, GR No. 231884 from July 2020, really does show the complexities, doesn't it? But also that unwavering pursuit of justice, even when it's difficult. Understanding cases like this, these landmark decisions, is so important for all of us. It helps us understand our legal system and the societal issues it grapples with. If you found this analysis valuable and you want to stay informed on other major legal and societal issues here in the Philippines, please make sure you subscribe. We'll bring you more in-depth analyses like this one.